This is from Timcast.com. Twitter removes portion of hateful conduct policy that prohibited dead naming and misgendering transgender people.
Based.
The platform has prohibited using pronouns matching a trans person's biological sex since 2018. The policy appears to have been changed on April 8th. An archived version of the page from April 7th still stated those rules. The last sentence has since been removed. Instead, the policy now states the platform prohibits targeting others with repeated slurs, tropes, or other content that intends to degrade or reinforce negative or harmful stereotypes about a protected category. I'm just going to say it again. I know I'm the low guy on the totem pole in this regard, but Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, me having a follow-up to the Jack Dorsey Vijagata episode we did, I think would be absolutely tremendous. But like I said, I'm the low guy. Obviously, I'd love to be sitting in a room with Elon and Joe Rogan, but at least I can say that follow-up, I think, would be very important because this was a core component of it.
It's so important, too. You think about, there's this guy, Charles Clymer, who is a trans activist, and he's very far left. I think he worked for the Human Rights Campaign. He worked for this ridiculous group called Catholics for Choice, a pro-abortion Catholic group. Yeah, not the most coherent kind of group. And if the policy were in place that you couldn't refer to Charles Clymer, you have to call him whatever girl name he goes by, this would be very convenient for Charles because he has a bit of a dodgy past back when he was Charles and got into some political scandals. So if you're not allowed to refer to Charles, all of a sudden, wow, how nice. All of these problems and scandals go away.
No longer a Google search away.
Exactly.
Well, I think the other issue with it is where is the line in what someone is allowed to identify as? And this is a huge component. So back in, I think, 2018, I was looking at New York City's laws. And they they identify 31 genders, but the law explicitly states infinite genders exist because it defines gender expression as self-expression. And so they say that you can't discriminate in public accommodations based on the clothing a person wears, the name they go by. And if that's the case, what is the legal limit? So I asked a human rights lawyer, and they said, well, obviously there's a reasonableness expectation in the law. The assumption is with this law, it's if a person is transgender, they're discernibly male but wearing a dress, you can't fire them. If they're discernibly male but going by the name Susan, you can't fire them. And so I asked a couple of human rights lawyers, if somebody went to Starbucks and applied for a job, then showed up on day one in a fursuit, and they called themselves Vociferon, Herald of the Winter Mists, would Starbucks be able to fire them for this? And they said, yes, of course, that's ridiculous. And I said, well, why can't they sue under that very same law that is their gender expression? And what I was told was a judge would laugh them out of the courtroom. And then I said, what if the judge doesn't like trans people and laughs at the man in a dress? What's the difference? And they didn't have an answer.
Well, and the case that established a lot of this is that Harris Funeral Home case from just a few years ago, in which we're talking about a funeral home here. So the customers at funeral homes are very, very vulnerable. They're grieving their loved ones. And there was this dude who decided that he wants to be a chick. And so he started wearing skirts to work. And the owner of the funeral home said, hey, man, I don't know what you're getting into, but you've got to have some respect for
skirts
the mourners.
Are not appropriate
skirts
for
are not
funerals.
appropriate. This isn't about you, man. This is about the people who are mourning. And he sued him, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that man's sexual fetish was more important than people's right to mourn in a respectable environment.
But think about how crazy this is. If you have a funeral home, the issue is not that we don't like that you're wearing a dress. I mean, kilts exist. They're similar in a certain respect. But we're talking about you respecting someone whose loved one died, and there's formal attire requirements. With New York City's law, they've basically abolished uniforms. It says you can't discriminate based on what someone wears in public accommodation. So if I show up at Starbucks wearing a clown costume, let's just be reasonable. I show up wearing jeans and a t-shirt and say, you can't make me wear those clothes because those are man clothes.
Yeah.
They can't do anything about it. The astounding thing, however, to me was, and this was honestly a big revelation for me in understanding law, a judge will laugh a person out of a courtroom. And then I said, then there will be many judges who are going to see a man wearing a dress and laugh and say, get out of my courtroom. This is ridiculous. Where's the line? And what I was told is, well, judges make those determinations. That they're the human interpretation of the law. And then I went, interesting. The law doesn't matter. The only thing that does is the culture. If the culture tolerates men and women cross-dressing in public, then the judge will defend it. If the culture tolerates fursuits, the judge will defend it. And right now it seems the fursuit goes over the line. But I'd say in 3 or 4 years,
Of course.
you will see people in full fursuits at Starbucks serving your coffee.
Of course. And notice when you say we've now got the abolition of uniforms, this is always the result of these kind of leftist policies that is specifically focused on trans right now, but all of these leftist policies is this constant leveling and lowering down and abolition of standards. So the answer that people give, the middle ground on the bathrooms, is what you said earlier, which is, well, let's just all have unisex bathrooms and we'll just all have individual bathrooms. What's the answer on the sports teams? Oh, we'll all just have our own sports teams or something. What's the answer on, and so what happens is we all just become this undifferentiated androgynous consumer. That's all we do. All we are now is I don't want to sound like a commie or something, but this is being pushed not just by the leftist activists, it's being pushed by the entire liberal establishment and by corporate America and the whole power structure, which is just to take away all the ornamentation, all the differentiation, all the natural, lovely diversity of life and make us all just a bunch of blobs to buy a bunch of hormones and purchase their products.
And uniform actually means the same. One form. That's what uniform is for, is to make all the same. So they're stripping away the communist sameness of everything to create a weird world to then reconfigure it so that everyone...
Well, yeah, instead of having different kinds of uniforms in different areas of life for men and women, now it's literally we will just be uniform, undifferentiated blobs plugged into our computers and living in the metaverse and eating bugs.
I think that's absolutely where we're going. The deep fakery is getting so advanced so rapidly. Last time I was on Rogan, I said I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And I was so wrong and so naive because I was looking at the modern iterations of deepfakes and I was just like, I'm not worried about that. I didn't stop to consider the rapid degree of advancement.
How long ago was that when you were on Rogan?
This was a year and a half ago.
A year and a half. Think about how fast.
Dude,
right.
AI has advanced so far in 6 months.
A year and a half ago, there was like one program that had accomplished voice manipulation, and there were some goofy videos that were low res, and I was just like, I'm not worried about this. And then, within a year and a half, it advanced to the point where I was on Instagram, and I saw a Rogan clip, and it's Joe advertising some, I think it was like I think it was penis growth or something like that, some weird like testosterone booster thing. And I was like, whoa. It was, if you watched it, you were like, that's a deepfake. If you were just passing through, you might not have noticed. And that's when I was like, oh man. Now we have that 11 Labs website where you can take 30 seconds of anyone talking, drop it in, and you can make them say whatever you want. Now I'm like, imagine what it's going to be like in a year. There's going to be a deepfake of Donald Trump giving a speech that looks completely real. He will say something kind of bad, but not really that bad, but bad enough to lose votes. And no matter what anyone says, the left will believe it.
I wonder if it'll get to the point where there'll be two presidents, according to everyone, and no one will know which one's the real one and which one's the fake one.
That's a good point because someone will make a deepfake clip of CNN and put it on Twitter, buy a verification, and then it'll be Don Lemon saying, Donald Trump has been reelected this 2024, and then people are going to see the clips and they're going to believe it. I mean, that's going to happen.
This AI stuff is actually the end of society. I know people like to claim that all sorts of advancements and innovations are the end of society. This one actually is, because it impels people to just retreat into themselves for everything. So now we will retreat into our own fantasies for art. It makes great art. So the art that I put up on my walls, I can just type it into Midjourney or any of them and get a beautiful piece of art. It will, you'll be able to create these deep fakes of video and audio. It's obviously going to be applied to porn. I assume it actually probably already is being applied to porn. Is it? Yeah. And I'm sure in the future, I'm sure it will be. And so people will have no reason to engage in reality because, one, you won't have any common referent to talk about. You'll just have, I'll have my video of Trump and you'll have your video of Trump and we'll both have made them up. I'll have my fantasy that I'm living in, be it personal, be it entertainment, be it sex, be it anything. And we'll all just be living in our pods, plugged into our own fantasies. That is the end of community.
The only thing I can think that would change that, or one of the things, is if the power goes out. And I don't want the power to go out, but if it did, then the artificial intelligence would die.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm sorry.
But there's ways to make perpetual electricity, and I'm concerned about that.
This is why solar, wind, geothermal, and all
tapping the vacuum. I mean, it's possible. And an AI will figure out how to do that.
This is why they're so hell-bent on pushing that. Because they want to create... My pitch, I actually pitched this, half pitched it to you guys with the Daily Wire. an idea for a show where I'll try and give the super simple version. It takes place in a world that's like humanity, civilization's collapsed. There's only one city left, and it's people. It's like the year 2130. Technology is comparable to what it is now. A conflict emerges between very thin, tall humanoid beings in white jumpsuits with chrome heads who can shoot lasers. Humans fight. No one knows how civilization collapsed, but they assume these creatures must have wiped out the planet, some kind of aliens. And then in the final episode of the season or whatever, there's a fight, and then someone hits like a crane release, which drops a boulder or a car onto one of these creatures and crushes it, disabling its force fields. They pull the chrome helmet off, and it's a human. Yeah. And the reveal is that society didn't collapse. It migrated underground into pods where humans all networked themselves with Neuralinks into a virtual world. And the reason why the last city was unaware of what happened to humanity is the news didn't stop. News was still being written, but it migrated. My example is, if someone came from the year 1900 to this time period, they'd immediately be like, get me a newspaper so I can learn about what's happening in the world. And then they would find that newspapers slowly started to disappear. If someone from the 1900s jumped 200 years in the future and then just tried to take a look at history based on their understanding of how to look through history, they would be like, newspapers ceased to exist in the year 2075. History was gone. We have no idea what happened. Humans, no, it just went online. So my idea for this show is there will be some humans who never migrate, and they will not have access to the metaverse historical archive. So to them, they'll just like their great grandchildren will be like, we don't know exactly what happened, but some kind of collapse happened, and we have no access. We just find these old records, these old websites and stuff in servers. We try to boot up and figure out where they all went.
The problem for those metaverse records, though, is that when everything is digital, you can just constantly change the records. This is the one of the prophecies of 1984.
And that's actually a component. This show would be fantastic because the people who live in the metaverse would have a warped view of reality because there would be oligarchs who rewrite history. But then the people who live in the real world with the physical, unalterable, will like meet one of these people in the metaverse and be like, look at these archives that we've brought. And they're like, that's not history. And they'll pull up Wikipedia to show history. And it'll be last edited yesterday. And they'll be like, this book hasn't been re-edited in 300 years.
This is all very scary, but I think what Mark Zuckerberg is trying to sell is like, what if you had Zoom meetings, but you were an octopus? And I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this information.
Well, Ian mentioned earlier, like you could identify as a carrot. Like you're gonna be in the metaverse on Tinder, and you're gonna be like a carrot, a dog, a toaster, a VW
swiping
van.
past personas.
Oh, a person. Swipe. Swipe on the person.
Even that gets back to the trans thing, like everything else today, which is that in the metaverse, did you see Mark Zuckerberg cut everyone off at the navel? So initially he had them as
their legs
people.
away.
They kept sexually harassing each other, so he just cut their legs off.
Is that what happened?
Yeah. In the beta testing, they kept pinching each other and things, so they had to chop off their sex.
Just don't take away their legs.
It is. I like how you brought that the word trans because of the transhumanism movement.
Well, that's what it's all about, ultimately.
And the word cis is from the mathematical term trans and cis.
Yeah.
Like cis alpine Gaul, trans alpine Gaul.
Stuff.
Say again?
The billionaires are all super into the transhumanist stuff, and because they're evil, they don't want to die. And that's an incredibly dark impulse, and that's why they're kind of getting behind all of the transgenderist stuff, because
that's totally true. I just
incremental step.
A lot of these guys are pretty intelligent, but sometimes intelligent people are just the dumbest people on earth.
Yes.
For all of human history, really rich, selfish people have tried to figure out how to live forever. And we're living in such a stupid time that this has been going on for all of history, and people now go online and they say, wow, we're really close to living forever. This time we've almost figured it out. Spoiler alert, they're not going to figure it out. That's not a real thing.
You're just going to kill a bunch of people in the process of trying to find out.
You're going to kill a bunch of people. You're going to cause all sorts of havoc. And it's that same lie from the Garden of Eden, which is the lie that ye shall be as gods. Yuval Harari refers to this as homo deus, that we're now going to take control over the future of humanity. And you think, okay, good luck, buddy. I mean, unfortunately, it's going to cause lots of problems in the short term, but it ain't going to work, man.
I think we need to get the Daily Wire crew. We might have to force them to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It's an anime, and but I'll just spoil it for you right now to explain.
I was just about to watch it.
Or Attack on
too,
Titan. Attack on Titan is also really good, and I'll tell you why. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is about a basically this entity that wants to sacrifice humans to become immortal, to ascend to a higher plane. And so it's just government conspiracy to murder people and sacrifice them. So that I think is interesting. There was something like Matt Walsh said about like not watching anime, and then there was like a backlash from people who were like, no, there's some good stories here. And Attack on Titan is about ancestral crimes and how certain races of people should be held criminally responsible for things their ancestors did thousands of years ago. So they're interesting stories that I think.
What the Italians did to those poor Etruscans. Those poor Etruscans.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me started,
dude. The Etruscans, let's rock and roll. That's the Romans took credit for all that stuff.
The Etruscans actually are where it's at. I was reading this Substack of Popehead the other day, great Substack, and I saw this quote from Seneca, the philosopher Seneca, and it was about the difference between the Romans and the Etruscans. And Seneca said, the difference between us Romans and those Etruscans is the Romans look at clouds creating rain, and they say, okay, natural forces came together, and they put the clouds, and then the rain came, and then here's some meaning that we could infer from that. But those Etruscans, who attribute everything to the divine, they believe that the gods wanted to express meaning, and so they pushed the clouds together and had the rain fall. And the thing is, the Etruscans were totally right.
Have you ever moved clouds with your magnetic field?
I have not. I am not a god.
You can. Well, it's flowing through you. You utilize the magnetic fields.
I think you're wrong.
I think my field is a little off kilter.
We talked with Alex Jones about this, and you weren't in the room though, but I could hear the screaming from Ian downstairs.
Yeah.
Alex. So Ian likes to talk about the magnetic fields all the time.
Yeah.
But Alex Jones actually mentioned that they did experiments and found there is some kind of energy around all of us, moving through us, that it's uncontrollable. That I don't know exactly how he described it, but he was basically saying it does connect all of us in some way, but you can't control it.
Just because something hasn't been controlled doesn't mean it can't be. That's an important differential.
You know what I think? Or I should say, you know what I hypothesize sometimes? That if there really is this connection to the greater or whatever, that people probably don't all have the exact same connection. And probably to varying degrees, some people, I wonder if the reason why you have woke NPC type people and some people who seem to be smarter, more perceptive, is simply because their, call it whatever you want, third eye or antenna is more receptive to, this kind of energy or whatever. That is to say, if you are closed off from the greater, from the spiritual, from whatever, prayer is meaningless to you. You don't experience it. There is nothing beyond this reality. You're a moist robot, and that's all that there is. But if you're someone who has a greater connection to whatever you want to call it, the spiritual realm or to God or whatever, you're going to understand and know things. And you also can't give that feeling to a person who doesn't have that. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.